I thought the notes were just a prank. Then I found a folder proving someone had been tracking my life for 6 months, and they knew things I'd never told anyone.
I moved into my apartment in the fall of 2021 when I was 26. It wasn't anything special, just a one-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of an older brick building outside Seattle. I had just started working remotely for a software company, and honestly, I wanted somewhere quiet where I could save money for a house someday. If you've ever lived in an apartment building, you know how quickly you learn everyone's routines without actually knowing them. The guy across the hall left every morning at 6 wearing the same reflective construction jacket. The woman downstairs walked her golden retriever around 8 every night, rain or shine. Somewhere on my floor, someone practiced the violin every Tuesday evening, and another person seemed determined to vacuum at exactly 9:30 on Sunday mornings. It wasn't a friendly building, but it wasn't unfriendly either. People nodded at each other in the hallway, held the elevator if they noticed you coming, and mostly kept to themselves. I liked that. My apartment was Unit 314. It overlooked the parking lot instead of the street, which meant it was usually quieter. From my living room window, I could see rows of parked cars, a couple of maple trees that turned bright orange in October, and the maintenance shed tucked behind the dumpsters. Most evenings followed the same routine. I'd finish work around 5, throw together something easy for dinner, maybe watch YouTube for an hour, then take a walk around the neighborhood if it wasn't raining, which, being Seattle, meant I skipped the walk more often than I actually took it. The first few weeks were completely normal. Then I started noticing my upstairs neighbor. I never actually saw who lived in Unit 414. What I noticed was the pacing. Almost every night, sometime between midnight and 1 in the morning, I'd hear slow footsteps moving from one side of the apartment to the other. Back, pause, back again. It wasn't loud enough to keep me awake. It was just consistent. At first I figured they worked nights or had insomnia. Didn't think much of it. One Saturday morning I ran into the building manager, Greg, while he was replacing light bulbs in the hallway. He was probably in his late 50s, always wore the same navy baseball cap, and somehow knew everyone's first name. I joked about the pacing upstairs. He laughed. "Old buildings make everything sound worse than it is," he said. "Probably. You'll get used to it." And I did. Mostly. About a month after moving in, I found the first note. It was taped neatly to the outside of my apartment door when I came home from grocery shopping. Plain white printer paper. Folded once. No envelope. Inside, there was only one sentence. "You always forget the milk." I actually laughed, because I had forgotten milk. Again. I figured one of my friends had somehow gotten into the building and decided to mess with me. I texted everyone I knew. Nobody admitted to it. I even posted a picture of the note in our group chat. The responses were exactly what you'd expect. "Creepy. One of your neighbors has jokes. Get a Ring camera." I tossed the note in the trash. That should have been the end of it. A few days later, I was riding the elevator with an older woman from the 4th floor. She looked at the grocery bag in my hand and smiled. "Remember the milk this time?" I laughed automatically. Then I froze. "How did you know?" She looked confused. "Oh. I just guessed." Then the elevator stopped on her floor. She walked out without saying another word. Felt strange for maybe 30 seconds. Then I convinced myself it was just a coincidence. People forget milk all the time, right? Life went back to normal. Work meetings. Laundry. Ordering takeout when I didn't feel like cooking. Weekend hikes. The violin every Tuesday. The vacuum every Sunday. The pacing upstairs every night. A week later, another note appeared. Same paper. Same handwriting. This one read, "Your kitchen light stayed on until 1:18 last night." That one bothered me, because it was true. I'd stayed up finishing a project and hadn't gone to bed until almost 1:30. I looked down both ends of the hallway. Nobody. I knocked on the apartment across from mine. No answer. I even checked with Greg downstairs. Kids, he shrugged. They get bored. There aren't any kids on my floor. He paused, then smiled awkwardly. Well, someone's trying to be funny. That explanation was just believable enough. So once again, I let it go. A couple of nights later, I started paying attention. Not because I thought someone was watching me, just because I was curious. I stood by my living room window around 8:30 and watched people come and go from the parking lot. The guy in the construction jacket, the woman with the golden retriever, a college student carrying 3 pizza boxes. Everything looked completely ordinary, until I noticed something else. The maintenance shed. Someone was standing beside it, too far away to make out. They weren't moving. They were just facing the building. I watched for maybe 20 seconds. Then a pickup truck drove past. When it cleared, whoever had been standing there was gone. I remember rolling my eyes. I actually said out loud, "You're getting paranoid." That became my explanation for everything. The notes, the pacing, the weird coincidence in the elevator. I was living alone for the first time. My brain was connecting dots that weren't connected. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Then, on a cold Thursday evening in November, I got home from work-related errands later than usual. The hallway was empty. Everything looked normal. I unlocked my apartment, stepped inside, dropped my keys on the kitchen counter. And that's when I noticed something sitting on my dining table. It wasn't there when I left. It was a plain brown folder. No name, no label, just sitting perfectly centered on the table. I knew I had locked the door before leaving. I checked it twice. Someone had been inside my apartment. I just stood there for a second. The apartment was silent. The refrigerator hummed. Rain tapped against the living room window. Nothing looked out of place. The TV was off. The bedroom door was still open. The kitchen chair was exactly where I'd left it. Only that folder didn't belong. I remember thinking there had to be a logical explanation. Maybe Greg had entered for maintenance. Maybe the property office had left something. Except they always emailed before entering a unit. And they definitely didn't leave paperwork on the dining table. I didn't touch the folder right away. Instead, I walked through the apartment. Bedroom, bathroom, closet, balcony. Empty. I even pulled back the shower curtain, even though I knew how ridiculous that looked. Nobody. Then I checked the front door. No damage. The deadbolt still worked. The windows were locked from the inside. It didn't make sense. Finally, I walked back to the table. The folder was surprisingly thick. Inside were dozens of plastic sheet protectors. Each one held a photograph. The first picture was me carrying groceries into the building. The second showed me leaving for work one morning. The third was taken from somewhere across the parking lot while I was unlocking my car. Then there were more. Me walking my usual route. Me carrying laundry downstairs. Me checking my mailbox. Me sitting on my balcony drinking coffee. Every picture had a date. Every picture had a time. Some went back nearly 6 months. That stopped me cold. I'd only lived here for about 2 months. The first photos had been taken before I'd even signed my lease. I flipped through the pages faster. There were handwritten notes underneath some of the pictures. Leaves at 8:07. Usually returns before sunset. Orders delivery every Friday. Always parks in the same spot. None of it was personal. None of it explained why. It was just documentation, like someone had been conducting a survey. I immediately called Greg. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. Then I called the leasing office. Closed. By then it was almost 7:30. I didn't know what else to do, so I called the non-emergency police line. 2 officers arrived about 40 minutes later. They were polite, professional. They looked through the folder. One of them asked, "Any enemies?" "No." "X?" "No." "Problems with neighbors?" Not that I know of. They photographed everything and dusted the folder for fingerprints. Nothing useful. One officer looked around the apartment. No sign of forced entry. I locked the door. You sure? Positive. He nodded slowly. We'll file the report. Should I stay somewhere else? He hesitated. If you have family nearby, it wouldn't hurt. Unfortunately, I didn't. The closest family I had lived in Oregon. I spent that night at a hotel. I barely slept. The next morning I returned with one of the officers just to collect some clothes. The apartment looked untouched. Almost. There was another note. This one was taped to the refrigerator. It hadn't been there the previous evening. Said only, "Wrong choice." The officer stared at it. So somebody's definitely been back. That was the first time someone else confirmed I wasn't imagining any of this. Management changed my locks that afternoon. Greg apologized over and over. I don't know how this happened. You have master keys. Only maintenance. How many copies? I honestly couldn't tell you. That answer bothered me. A lot. I bought 2 security cameras that same day. One faced the front door from inside. The other pointed toward the living room window. I also bought one of those cheap battery-powered door alarms. Maybe it was overkill. Maybe not. For 3 days. Nothing happened. No notes. No pacing upstairs. No strange cars. I started convincing myself the police report had scared whoever it was. Then Sunday night arrived. At exactly 12:46 a.m., my phone buzzed. The front door camera had detected movement. I opened the app immediately. The hallway camera wasn't mine, so all I could see was the inside of my apartment. The notification kept repeating. Motion detected. Motion detected. Motion detected. But nobody came through the door. I watched the live feed for nearly a minute. Nothing moved. Then, very slowly, the doorknob turned. Once. Twice. The deadbolt held. Whoever was outside stopped moving. I waited. 30 seconds. 1 minute. Nothing. Finally, I worked up enough courage to look through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Completely empty. No footsteps. No elevator. Nothing. I opened the door. Nobody. I checked both directions. Still nobody. The elevator display still showed the 4th floor. The stairwell door hadn't moved. It was impossible. I went back inside. Locked everything again. As I turned around, the motion alert activated once more. Only this time, it wasn't the front door. It was the living room. I slowly looked toward the window. The blinds were open just enough to see outside. Across the parking lot, near the maintenance shed, someone was standing perfectly still, watching my apartment, too far away to recognize. No flashlight. No phone. Just a dark figure. I grabbed my own flashlight and pointed it through the glass. The parking lot lit up. Cars. Rain. Dumpsters. Empty pavement. The person was gone. Again. The next morning I showed the footage to Greg. He watched it twice. Then frowned. You know. What? The maintenance shed doesn't face your apartment. What do you mean? He pulled out a property map. The angle was wrong. From where that person had been standing, they shouldn't have been able to see my living room window at all. Unless they'd been somewhere else. Somewhere higher. That's when both of us looked toward the 4th floor. The apartment directly above mine. Unit 414. The one with the pacing. Greg checked his clipboard. That's strange. What? He frowned harder. I don't have anyone listed in 414. What? It should be vacant. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. If it's vacant, I asked quietly. Then who's been walking around every night? Greg didn't answer right away. He just kept staring at the clipboard. Then he looked back at me. Come with me. We took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway looked exactly like mine, just 1 floor higher. Same beige walls. Same faded carpet. Same buzzing fluorescent lights. Apartment 414 was directly above my unit. Greg unlocked the deadbolt with a master key. The door opened. The apartment was empty. No furniture. No boxes. No curtains. Nothing. The air smelled stale, like the windows hadn't been opened in months. I walked into the living room. The floor was covered in dust. Except for one path. A narrow trail of clean footprints led from the bedroom to the window. Back and forth. Back and forth. The exact route I'd been hearing every night. Greg whispered, "Nobody's supposed to be in here." We followed the footprints. The bedroom was empty. The bathroom was empty. Then we opened the hallway closet. It wasn't empty. Inside were folding chairs, 3 camera tripods, a pair of binoculars, several disposable cameras, and a stack of manila folders exactly like the one that had been left in my apartment. I didn't touch them. Neither did Greg. He slowly backed away and pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police." For the first time since all of this started, I actually thought it was over. I was wrong. While Greg was on the phone, I looked toward the living room window. From that angle, you could see straight into my apartment, my kitchen, my couch, my dining table, even the spot where I worked every day. The blinds I'd thought gave me privacy did almost nothing at night. Someone had been able to watch nearly everything. The police arrived within 15 minutes. They photographed the apartment, collected the cameras, collected every folder. One detective asked me to sit downstairs while they processed the scene. Hours passed. Around 4 in the morning, the detective finally came outside. I stood up immediately. "Did you find out who it is?" He shook his head. "No fingerprints." "What about the lease?" "The apartment hasn't been rented in almost a year." "What about security cameras?" He looked uncomfortable. "That's another problem." The building had hallway cameras. The lobby had cameras. The parking lot had cameras. None of them showed anyone entering or leaving 414. Not once. The detective assumed the footage had been corrupted. I wanted to believe that. Over the next few days, more strange details came out. The disposable cameras contained hundreds of photos. Not just of me. Other tenants. Different apartments. Different years. Some pictures were dated almost 4 years earlier. People who no longer even lived in the building. Every folder documented someone different. Schedules. Parking spaces. Shopping habits. Work hours. None of the files included names. Just apartment numbers. The detective told me it looked less like obsession and more like someone collecting routines, patterns, habits. Nobody knew why. I broke my man. Before I left, Greg apologized one last time.